This is House Planning Help episode 221. Hello, I'm Ben Adam Smith, and this is the podcast for you if you're interested in self-build, because I'm exploring what houses we should be building in the 21st century and trying to break down the major roadblocks that may get in our way. Today, it's a solo session as I review my build schedule. So this is going to be very much focused on masonry construction and aiming for passive house. However, there are common stages that every build goes through. We're going to start with a story that is actually about the schedule, and that's, are we ahead of schedule? It's a question that we've asked on and off over the last few months, and our contractor will never mention we're ahead of schedule. Even if we ask that direct question, it's more, we're going to finish on time. And this has become a little bit of a running joke. What is Mark going to say? However, recently, we ran into quite a big issue. Now, this is fairly late in the process. We've got a house, it's largely fitted out, and we were just having the services connected. Everything had been organised. However, when the water company came to connect us to their water main, they couldn't find their water main. How crazy is that? You'd think they'd have everything documented and would know exactly. Then we got into a bit of trouble. We're still a priority case with the water company, but that means nothing because they believe the water main is in the road alongside the gas main. And when we had to close the road and do all of that stuff, they were saying that their pipes were in the pavement, and obviously they discovered that they were not there. So they have admitted it's their responsibility, their mistake. They're going to pay for another road closure. However, it's not that simple, because what needs to happen now is the local authority need to go through their process. They need to advertise the road closure. And in the best case scenario, this means that we're probably going to finish as anticipated on that contract date. Whereas if anything else goes wrong now, there could be a delay after that. So very weird, something completely outside of our control has cropped up. And this is where I think Mark from experience knows, never say you're ahead of the schedule, not until everything has been finished, everything has been finalised. And perhaps that's a lesson to me that it feels like we're at the end now. It just feels, what more is there to do? And there are a few things that we're going to talk about that haven't been done yet and will take a little bit of time. But perhaps because the decision making has eased for me, I'm just seeing the finish line, or I want the finish line. I understand this self-build fatigue, that this is something that is going really well and is sticking or even ahead of the schedule. So I imagine if your build has gone on and on for one reason or another, it must really take its toll. So I thought I'd mention that today as we're talking about schedules. Very interesting that it's not over till you've got to the finish line, and just bear that in mind. So this is a solo episode where I'm going to look at the stages of my build. And where we're going to start is the document that I was given initially from the contractor, where they state the various different stages that we're going to go through. Most of this podcast is actually not going to be based on that, but more the timeline as I look through the photos, because I've been taking photos every 2 to 3 days as we've gone through the project. It's perhaps eased a little bit as we've come towards the end, and maybe it's not so interesting. So I'm going to run through that. It's about 30 bullet points on this list. This is the document we were given. It's a bit like a Gantt chart, so it shows you when these things are happening, and it's got money involved, which bit of money, what percentage of the total is going to be needed. Enabling works, utilities, drainage, foundations, ground floor, mortars, walls, first floor, roof, ceilings, windows, doors and glazing, second fixing, ventilation, stairs, mechanical plumbing, electrical, smoke and heat detection, floor and wall finishes, decoration, external works, and contingencies. So it may well be that this is just a rough outline to show us as clients at the beginning. And the other thing is, obviously, the sequencing has to follow a certain pattern, because you're going to need the building there before you can start decorating and so forth. However, within that, there's a little bit of flexibility. And I think that will become apparent as I go through all of this. Just before we get started on our review of the stages of my self-build, having a look at that schedule, I wanted to say it might be worth loading up the show notes from this episode, because we've got a lot of images there. There's quite a lot that I talked through. It's more or less a big list. How boring is this episode going to be if you don't have some pictures with it? And although it's not comprehensive, it's probably the most pictures that we've ever packed into the show notes. So go and take a look, houseplanninghelp.com/221, and hopefully it will just bring this to life a little bit, because as I mentioned, it's a list and we're going to work our way through month by month what is happening on the site. So it started in December. It wasn't the beginning of the month. We were midway through. And so I'm going to call this month 0, because this was a lot of the enabling work to begin with. It started with security, making sure that when you've got tools, etc. on site, there's somewhere safe to store them. We had a couple of shipping containers which came with the plot. They just needed to be relocated. I think they may have even have brought another container onto site, maybe a couple more. There was also a portaloo that was brought to site. They arranged a parking area, and around the perimeter of the whole site was Harris fencing that they put up there, so just so you can lock it at night and know that everything is safe. So that's the site set up. And then the next job was marking out the site. Where are they going to need to dig? Where will the house go? They've got all these string lines. They obviously make it quite accurate and then use these lines as they dig things out. That happened in this month 0, as I'm calling it, which was just around Christmas. It happened quite quickly as well. I think I was in a bit of shock as, oh my goodness, this is actually, it feels like everything's suddenly moving quickly when you've had slow planning, doing all these things, challenges, just talking about it. And then suddenly in January, which I'm going to call month 1, even though we're only about 2 weeks in, we got to putting in the shuttering for the foundations. So this was a strip foundation, and that month they also poured in the concrete. Once that is done, they cut back all of the shuttering that is still about and level up that site, so you're ready to start putting the first block work onto the site. Little dwarf walls. We talked earlier when I ran through that big list from the contractor about waste pipes. Also, I think a few cables might go in at this point before you put the flooring in, or around about this time. I'm not saying this is 100% accurate. This is how I have viewed it. So the flooring was the next thing. On our project, it was a beam and block floor. That went down very quickly. Precast concrete beams, and then the blocks just put in there and the services brought through. Sometimes they'd cut little areas where those pipes would come through. And that's it. You have the solid base to build off from there. What's funny is that maybe naively, I would think that all the floors would be done first before you move on to the next stage. So you'd perhaps put the insulation down and the screening, but that's going to come much later in the process. What they're really doing here is the superstructure. I said I wasn't going to use any of the big words, but that is what this first stage is, just getting the structure of the house up, and it happens quickly. So they have a few layers of insulation round the outside. I'm not going to do this justice. And the block work just starts. There's obviously insulation there. I think because of our build, we've had a few different types of insulation. So you'll hear, sometimes it will sound like it's coming in at strange times, but there was a little bit around the foundations, and then in the walls, they were using this earth wool insulation, which you can squeeze, but you can just feel it's a bit like a blanket, which they put in to the cavity. And the block work for that first floor, you almost fall over as you come onto site and think, oh my goodness, the building's half finished. Of course it isn't. It's just that first lift as the rooms do start to take shape. So that's all in January, quite a lot going on. And once you're out of the ground, it happens quickly with masonry. You're going to get an impression of what the building's going to feel like. Month 2, February, the block work up to the windows. They put the lintels over the top. These can be various materials you can use. I think in our case, put my reputation on the line here, was it stainless steel? It had all these holes drilled through them or something like that. So they go above the windows. We had one big section of steel on our project as well, because we've got a big open plan kitchen, dining room, living room. I think a lot of people do these days. And the posi joists just obviously can't provide the support that's necessary, or can't go the whole span of our building. So we put that steel in, and then you'd have the posi joists on each side. So there was joisting, and I can't remember whether this probably came before, didn't it? Some of the membrane was put around there. Airtightness is always something we're thinking about. So at that stage, there was definitely, they did something for that. Then it came to the next level. So they put the boarding down on the first floor and started the block work going up again with the cavity walls, second lift. This was lovely to just see the views, because that's one area, unless you've got a drone and you've flown it in exactly the right place, or some people put a camera on a pole, we didn't know what the view would look like from the first floor. So you get an idea at this stage. The scaffolding has gone up as well. I think when they were down very low, they actually used a different type. It was stands just for a while, and then they swapped that over to scaffolding. So that continues up until you have the building there. And I think that was our only bad weather. We had some days where the temperature did hit below zero and they stopped, but we're really talking 1 or 2 days. It didn't affect us too much. And then the trusses went up. So that's all in month 2, February. Then we move into month 3, where they're starting to waterproof the roof, put the battening down and get it tiled. And that means on the inside, you can get to work as well. So upstairs, they started by doing the ceiling, boarding that all off. They insulated the cat slide roof at this stage. The cat slide, again, was something we had to have for planning permission. So it's at a slight slant. It almost makes it look like there's a kink in the roof at the back. And we did this for planning purposes to try and bring more light into the neighbour's property. It just makes it a little bit more complex. It would otherwise be a standard rectangular form, so just slightly off that, slightly more complicated, but not too bad. And then they were putting the air tightness membranes across the ceiling, so having to put that above them and then tape it up as well. I think at that stage they were closing up the windows as well. You can see the insulation, and they put in these, they look like bits of plastic just to seal it all off once all the insulation has just been tidied up around there. At this stage, they started the stud walls upstairs, because downstairs we were all masonry. As you come upstairs, it changes into the stud work, so they start building that, and that comes up very, very quickly. You get a sense of the rooms, because beforehand it was just a big open space. They also created a full ceiling for the MVHR ductwork, and that pretty much just goes down the corridor, and then each duct only very slightly goes into the rooms. So that's really nice. So you're not getting any ductwork at all in the rooms. It's mainly down this false ceiling in the corridor. So I think that's a little bit lower than all the other ceilings, but you probably wouldn't know unless you measured it and thought, oh yeah, that's just a tiny bit less. There was a delay on the windows. I think we needed something bespoke in the ends to support the windows, which were very heavy. So perhaps the sequencing is out here a touch. Month 4, we installed the windows and doors upstairs. There are a couple of doors that go onto the balcony. Also, the first fix electric started. That's cabling mainly, and the plumbing as well. So pipe work going into all that stud work. They focus very much upstairs first. Windows were taped and foamed where necessary. The ground floor air tightness was also going on at this stage. So it's a bit like a bin liner, the huge great bin liner that they lay down on the beam and block floor. I'm not sure, it's possible that there might be something else below that so it doesn't rip. They're taping that to the walls, and then that's going to get insulated on top of that. PIR insulation, big thick insulation. I think it was 2 layers of that, and then a screed goes on top of all that insulation. So we have a load of insulation underneath us. It's Passivhaus. We like this. And what else did we do this month? The first floor ceiling, I think they started to cover that up once all the ventilation pipes were in there. They did some sound insulation upstairs before they were about to plasterboard everything. So you have this skeleton of where all the walls are, and you can see everything in there, where all the wires come out and the pipes. And then when they're ready, they put all the sound insulation in and start to close them all up. So we're on to month 5. Should we just have a breather for a few seconds? You all right? You okay? You with me on how this sequencing is going so far? I can just imagine this as a slide presentation. Here I am with my slide presentation, and slide 229. Month 5 then, what went on here? So downstairs, doors were installed. There was also more ducting for the MVHR where the ceiling hadn't been covered up for downstairs. Outside, some guttering was going on to the roof because they want to reduce the scaffolding for the lime rendering, which they did. So outside, the final finish is beginning. I think there were 2 coats of lime render, so going around the building twice. Also, just doing some final decoration on the garage weatherboard. That probably would come just after the lime render, but it did happen this month. Some landscaping too, just digging out where the patio would be again, because we've had everything set down. You're digging into everything all the time and moving more spoil away. There was a soak away that was needed too, so that everything goes into that where it's just wastewater from the roof and so on. The stairs went in this month. And then another important part to really make it feel like those walls are walls, and also for the airtightness strategy in this building, plastering. So that had happened upstairs a week or so, a couple of weeks before, and then it began downstairs as well. And also in month 5, they were digging the trench for the services. So they started that landscaping work outside, and it just naturally led on to a big trench out to the main road. And I think I was filming when they put the cable down, this massive, great, thick cable, and uncoiled it. And probably below that, there were drainage pipes as well. So all of that heading out to the road. And the other thing I noted from this month, loft insulation. Would this be the last bit of insulation in the house? I think it might be. So big, thick blanket up in the loft. We're not going to be using this loft. We've got our storage within the main envelope of the house. So although we have a loft hatch, that will really be if there's a problem, if water is leaking into the house or something, then we will go up there. Otherwise, nothing is going up into that attic space. Month 6, you see a lot has been done already, but this internal fit out, as you discover, takes quite a lot of time. So the decorating has begun. We have a few designed features that our interior designer suggested and have been great. They really add a lot of value to the house and make it feel like it's been thought through. Feature walls, a lot of this stuff is just MDF as well, which a good carpenter can just make look great with good designs as well. So rendering was then complete, so the scaffolding came down and we could see the building for the first time. This was also when the road was closed for the services. So remember, we were not hoping to connect water here because they were saying, well, our water pipes aren't in the road. So what we were doing was sewage, gas. Have I forgotten anything else? But all of those sorts of things. The porch went up at this point. Plastering was just about complete as well, so decorating could move downstairs. Then I think we must just about be there. You see, with first fix and second fix, which is when they're putting in all the pipes and wires, whether you're talking about plumbing or electrics, it doesn't all happen in one go. It very much seems to go in stages. Perhaps they'll go and work on another site for a bit and then come back. Maybe something blocks them. And so I think we can safely say that this month, all of the first fix plumbing was complete. They were certainly starting the second fix electrics upstairs. That's putting on plug sockets and light switches and things like that. Tiling in the bathrooms as well. Once you've finished that first fix, that can happen. There's gas and electricity now at the house as we move into month 7. Honestly, we're getting there soon. You've done very well to listen this far in the podcast. And this is where you might not have this on your project. However, I would say it's been brilliant. It hasn't cost us a massive amount. And as I say, I think these bespoke units which were being made on site have delivered a lot of value. So those were being built and painted and put into place. They were also digging around the house because we've got a pathway. And yes, again, we've been digging down. So that means more spoil has to be removed from there. And there's a retaining wall. It's not massively high. Perhaps we would have initially had it as bricks, although costs have just run away. I mean, this whole project costs have run away a little bit. So these are sleeper walls now. They go up in 2 stages just to help with the planting and children falling off them, just so they're not quite as steep. The flooring was laid at this point as well, so it's definitely feeling more finished every day that goes by inside. Second fix plumbing, putting in those loos, basins, showers. I'm not sure that's 100% finished even as I record this now. It's very, very close though. Second fix, electrics moves downstairs. It can't get finished because the kitchen hasn't been installed, although month 7, which we're in, it starts to go, and that's a lot of it just units that go in to begin with. Again, that goes in very, very quickly with a couple of chippies working hard. Our contractors, obviously, that's one of the skills they have, so they put all that in. It looks great, very excited about the kitchen. I just get a feeling that's going to be an important place for me, and my triangle between the oven, the hob and the sink is working very nicely, and the fridge just behind there. Months 8 and 9. So look, this is when I'm recording the podcast at the moment. We've still got a few jobs to do, and we thought perhaps we might be a month ahead of schedule. Who knows? That might just be us inexperienced thinking that this is going to happen. So these are the jobs on the to-do list. Complete the kitchen, and that really means worktops, plumbing in sinks and various things. I haven't been there for a couple of days, so it's possible all of that has been done now. The last bits of plumbing and electrical work all around the house, really. There can't be a massive amount of it. Finished decorating, it feels like a lot of it has been decorated. Sometimes you're going back on yourself where you think you finished a room, and I noticed at one point they put the skirting boards in and had to do a little bit of touching up again to the paintwork on the walls that they already had. So it's little things like that. I guess when I've asked what is going to be happening over the next couple of weeks, they said there's a lot of decorating still to do. It's hard as the layman to see that. Where is this decorating? But that is something that obviously still needs to happen. We've got things like a balcony, which is going to take some work to put together. Commission the MVHR at some point, install the radiators and the boiler. There'll be snagging, put the floor in the garage, finish the landscape, and that's really just fencing, levelling the site, seeding it, putting the driveway in. See, I imagine a lot of this could be done fairly quickly. It depends how many people you've got on site, and when you're talking about plumbing and electrics, well, there's a team doing that. Our contractors subcontract at that point, so that's extra workers on the site. And so these final jobs, I don't know. I think what we'll have to do, we'll have to come back to the show notes here and finish off the schedule. What did happen in which month as we've got this far? So we'll tweak that. If you want to go to the show notes for this episode, then you can, houseplanninghelp.com/221. It's probably the most photos that we've ever had in the show notes before, and hopefully you were somewhere that you were able to have a look at the photos while I was describing it all to you, because it will make a lot more sense. I know we weren't able to show you everything with those photos, but we did try to give you a sense of going through this entire project. Also, if you're a Hub member, check out my progress log for even more detail. I've been updating it every week to 2 weeks, putting photos in there. The other thing, the whole point of these progress logs is for accountability, so that you can put together a list of things that you're working on and stay accountable to the rest of the group. So that's what I've been doing there, and you can take a look at all of those decisions, things that have cropped up, how we've solved those challenges. So that's for our Hub members. And we'll link you across to our architecture firm, Parsons and Whitley, Mars Builders, who are our main contractor, and Gabby, our interior designer. We'll put all those links into the show notes because we've been talking about all of them today. houseplanninghelp.com/221. There you go. Another podcast done and dusted. A few more things to tell you about before we wrap up today, and one of them is that we've opened up a new Facebook group. This is free, but it is a closed Facebook group, so you need to conform to our criteria to enter. I think we're fairly lenient. You have to be building a house, which I imagine you will be, and you have to be wanting to make it as sustainable as possible. If you tick both of those boxes, we'll let you in. We'll probably let you in if you haven't ticked both of those boxes. TalkSelfBuild.com. We've got a domain that will redirect you there nice and easily. TalkSelfBuild.com. It's growing fast, our closed Facebook group. Come and chat about it. If you've got challenges, bring them to the table. TalkSelfBuild.com. We'll be mentioning that on and off in the future. For our Hub members, just so you're aware, some new things in the Hub. Our penultimate video. Can you believe it? From the Buckinghamshire Passivhaus story. This is all about installing the PV array. It's actually turned into quite a long video because there's loads of really interesting things that we talk about. We have Robert Flynn from Solar Barn giving us all of that information, telling us about the array. We look at some of the costs as well, how much it's going to be generating. And they're fitting out the interior at Buckinghamshire Passivhaus too. So just one more video from that story to go in. Amazing. And then I think we're going to head back to Longbarrow. We've got our latest progress call in the archive too, and we had a special guest, Ryan Watt from the We Build Academy. Again, we tied this in a little bit because we were talking about renewables for the home. He's got a lot of experience in this, being a building services engineer, and we were just getting some self-build tips because he's launched his podcast. We'll probably have him on as a guest at some point in the future, and we were just finding out how is he helping self-builders progress through their journey of building a home. So those are new bits and pieces. We've got all the courses. We've got the forum, Stay Accountable. We talked about the progress log today. If you're not a hub member, well, check out what you're missing. houseplanninghelp.com/join. We love you in there. It's where I spend most of my time. houseplanninghelp.com/join. That's as far as we go for today. Thank you so much for listening. The House Planning Help podcast is produced by Regen Media, content that matters.